What's good, people? What's good, people? Is your boy Sandy and Santi back in the place to be for me. Yeah. So those of you, actually, I forgot. I'm not even doing my for those of you that don't know me because this episode 4, you should have been known about the boy, Sandy and Santi, contemporary visual artist, and this is in relation to art. Today we're tackling a different topic. Today we're talking about mental health in relation to art. This one is like fully loaded and it has different parts. And as usual, I'm gonna touch on different parts and give you something to research more, think of more. I ain't got all the answers, you feel me? I'm not professional like that. But I've gathered a bit of research and like one two thing to create a good dialogue and conversation. I try and keep it as basic level as possible so everybody can get involved in the conversation. Hopefully we're gonna spill some break some myth as they call them, and hopefully we're gonna kind of give a different perspective. But yeah, just to start with, I was also one of those people that used to believe, oh, to be an artist, you're a bit off. And which upon this research, it was quite eye opening actually when I did the research the first time and found out that actually that's not quite accurate in the sense. But yeah, we'll get to it. So I'll start off with introduction. What is mental health? And then obviously I'll walk my way into how it relates to art and all that other good stuff. So I got notes today, you feel me? Because this is one of them topics that you can't just throw things out there. Actually, for sake of clarity, I actually recorded one of these already. Actually, on some just talking, I did get all the information out, but I didn't feel it was researched well enough, and I needed to give people more things that they can go and read and check about. So again, it's not over research, but yeah, just some more actual names of places that you can potentially research and stuff. But yeah, definition of mental health. The loose definition I would say is the condition of one's psychological and emotional state. Pretty much like your physical health. If something is struggling, strained, stressed, all of that, it could affect your mental. Essentially, that's kind of the concept of mental health and well-being, so to speak. It's just kind of those the things you don't see, basically taking care of those. Which means everybody that has a brain and is a human that can be emotional and has a psychological kind of, I mean, if you have a brain, I'm hoping psychological in a sense, but yeah, essentially everybody can have mental health and can suffer from different kind of mental health. Some it's just temporarily, i.e., you're suffering stress or something and has affected you. Some are more permanent conditions that's actually affected how they are. Some of them are secondary conditions that can be cured, but also somewhat mini permanent, and the list goes on. Again, I minded you guys, I'm not a professional. I can't give you a list of all the mental health illnesses that they're going. We're talking about, even in this topic, I'll try and highlight more the ones that are associated with artists like bipolarism and things like that. But yeah, let's start off with some important, for me as well. This was interesting because I wanted to start off with a bit more general, but I think something that helps a little bit. Some of the stereotypes I feel are attached to mental health. Some of them are a bit out there in terms of like when you deep it, actually there's not enough, but there's a sensation. Actually, this is how I describe it. Without directly intending to, I think mainly films and in a way poetry has sensationalized having a mental illness, or in a way also created a bit of a horror attached to it. So, for example, in when you watch these Halloweens or horror films and all of this, you see people dressed like a psychiatric patient, which in a lot of ways is actually wild because I think even films like Jekyll and Hyde, it's not a film, it's actually a telenovela from way back. We know Jekyll and Hyde in a way when we associate it with like this, serial killer kind of messed up person, bipolar animal, whatever. The idea is there is so much violence and horror attached to mental health patients or people with kind of suffering from certain mental health, which to start with is actually untrue. There's not that many. There's and I'll read some stats here actually that kind of was busting the bubble. Um, the National Institution of Mental Health, again, one of those people that has made a comment about this, notes that most people with most of their psychological patients are not even violent or don't commit violent crime, should I say? That's not really anything to do with their mental health. And then there are other informations like even the reality that a lot of, even when you think of specifically fine artists, a lot of the idea comes from like people like Van Gogh and just thinking of, oh, Frida Kahlo and people just associating their arts to their condition, which in reality, actually, you can argue that their condition existed independently of their creativity in a lot of ways. To start with the Mythbusters, I mean, I'll try and mention a few other things. So, in what country was it? Give me a second again. I'll give you the name of the country. I believe it was in Sweden, or is it Swedish? I can't pronounce everything, so please don't kill me. Karolinska Institution in 2013 did a study titled Mental Illness, Suicide, and Creativity. It was for people roughly around the age of 40 years old, and it took a total of 1.2 million people's perspectives to put together, and jobs that they do, different kind of parts of creativity and like regular people's job. And it actually showed that actually there's not a higher amount of mental health illness among creativity. The only thing that it did lean towards, it did say that there is likelihood of mental illness compounds by the population. Basically, if you have they have found some tendencies, or should I say, what may come across as symptoms with people that have bipolar or somewhat like schizophrenia a bit. But that's also a study that's in Sweden for a very small demographic, or compared to the rest of the world. There's not been enough research or studies that has been able to prove or show a direct link between mental illness and creativity over the years, which in a way, again, is busting that bubble. Another one that I want to talk about is even the struggling artist myth. This idea of romanticizing someone being a bit off to create actually has nothing to do with nothing. Again, this comes from more so writers again. The whole drunk guy that does this. There's actually an interesting one about Edgar Allan Poe, where I was reading about that. It basically talks about him, if he was alive right now, would he be diagnosed as a somewhat bipolar disorder? And because of some of his symptoms, they see that he had basically he described what we call the manic period, and like the manic like, how do you call it, manic episodes, and the manic depressive temperaments. Essentially, it's like an up and down description, i.e., a time where everything is dull. One can't create. Everyone is somewhat depressed, and then there's other times where they're hyper restless. They're hyper unsettling, and some can even look at it as a good time to create and a spur of creativity, but that doesn't necessarily come from wanting to create. It's almost like if you're creative as such, and you're restless and you can't sleep, and this happens, and you have all these ideas going back and forth, it comes across as you're being creative, or your creative time of your life, but really you're really handling whatever you're going through at the moment. And maybe creativity is your way of expressing, or kind of like pouring out that. Sometimes as simple as you can't sleep and you start writing or you start reading. None of this actually pushes it as that's your state you need to be in to create. So what happens is, even with people that Edgar Allan Poe, they did a stats of all his time of when he wrote and when he wasn't writing, and you find that he wrote in the times that I guess manic episodes, and they found that actually he technically had a lot more work done when he wasn't, like, he had less work done. Basically, he had more time that he didn't do any work than the times that he did work. So even though they were meant to be balanced out, someone once put it right, and I'll try and remember the name, but they said that yes, of course, I think it might even be him. The idea of being in the manic episode is like you can create and all of this stuff, but it can be pushed that bit far where you can't create anymore. And more importantly, the idea of you being able to create doesn't necessarily mean that what you're creating is coherent, or is even makes sense, if that makes any sense. It's the same thing with like being restless and trying to read a book at night. Yes, you're reading the words, but there's a high chance you don't even understand what you're reading. You just can't stop reading, if that makes any sense. So the idea of being able to still create through all these kind of situations don't necessarily mean that's the right state to be in when you do create. And there've been more, not necessarily studies, but there's been more evidence to show that even people with these issues can create despite the issues, as opposed to the issues are the reason why they create. Hopefully that's busted some kind of, and I'll do a bit more description later, but I just wanted to kind of capsulate a few things when it comes to like even the stereotype where it comes from, the romanticizing of the artist struggling. Like for example, Van Gogh. Everybody loves to talk about he only sold one painting when he was alive. That favors two people, in my opinion. The idea that artists a certain kind of way allows the middlemen, the galleries, the consultants, the middle people, basically, to essentially own that kind of right and control over where things go and how things work, because you can't trust the artist that's not necessarily sane and all of that. So not in a malicious way. I feel like that is also kept on by those that party. And then there's another group of it that is also the artists that romanticized it and attached themselves so much to this idea of struggling and going through this, and oh, you're just this off guy, and oh, you think you're so cool with your Dr. Martens and all of that. No, no, my guy, you're the same as everybody else, and everybody else has headaches sometimes. Same way you can be going through stuff. Real life can be hitting you. Being an artist doesn't make your struggle a little bit more special than the others, and that's not in a bad way. I'm just like, the reality is the same way your struggle is just as special as the other person is the same way your struggle is not as special as, it's not more special than anybody else's. And so when you mix the two, the romanticizing from one end and the other people that kind of want to stay the same, it creates this allure of artists, and that propagates a certain idea that, oh yeah, these people are like this, and but it's really more stereotype between films, poets. There's not that many kind of evidence. In fact, there's been more artists that were able to do a lot through their life successfully that in depth did more successful. It doesn't really work that many times where you're completely zero and then you die, and that's when you become get big. In fact, it's said that Van Gogh only didn't sell as much work because he wasn't sociable enough. He really didn't mix with people. He couldn't really express himself. He couldn't, and these things kind of help, kind of puts him in a bit of a, oh, that's a weird guy kind of energy, which wasn't sensationalized at the time either. So the idea of being off and maybe I'm so, you know what I mean, I'm this artist guy. No disrespect to artists, I'm an artist myself. But sometimes we also adapt that and kind of like make it our identity, which technically is not, there's no backing for it. In fact, the study I was talking about earlier, and from the Switzerland, so from the Swedish institution of I'll remember the name, Kondusky or something like that. Sorry guys, I'm freestyling now. Essentially, the study is from the you know what? Let's do, this is why we wrote down stuff today, you know, so that we don't do freestyles. I was doing a freestyle again. Well, see, I was right. It's Konduskian Institution, and it's a Swedish Karolinska institution. Basically, it's spelled Kardinska. Hopefully, you guys got that and you can go and check it yourself. But essentially, in that study, it found that people like farmers had more issues with mental health. They found people that are working in law firms and like high tension jobs, like accountants and things like that, had more mental health issues with strains and stress and things like that, more so than artists actually. So even the idea of, it's not like in majority a lot of artists have it. Even worse, the ones that do have it tend to kind of, they don't necessarily, and some of them have, I'm not saying this is for everybody, some of them haven't actually invested the time in figuring out that this is actually something that you can operate with despite your state of mind, versus this is what created your state of mind, or your state of mind created the art, if that makes any sense. And so I just thought I'll start off with that, putting some of those to rest, and then I can talk about some more cool stuff. So I'll try to follow the structure of how I've put this together. Talked a little bit. I mean, we can go into like even the artists that are considered people with mental health. So Farida Kahlo, for example, she essentially lost a lot of, she lost her children basically. That got her into depression. She also had an unstable marriage with her guy, which also didn't help. And when you put that together in any situation, regardless if you're an artist or not, that would put someone in depression. So again, has nothing to do with art. Picasso, when he was going through the blue period of his work, he lost a friend that he had taken his friend's girl. You know what I mean? On some Usher vibe, basically. You know what I mean? Usher didn't take people's, but you know he's Mr. Stereo Girl, as I heard. But allegedly. But Picasso went one of those, he had those kind of episodes where essentially his friend, or some guy that his friend, they were both dating the same girl, or he finessed the girl of his friend. His friend ended up killing himself. And that put him into his blue period. And in that blue period, he was still creating, but he was creating work, I guess, filled with this, that, and the third. Essentially, I'm bringing up that particular time period to say that he was able to create despite what he was going to, not necessarily saying what he was going to provided. In fact, what's interesting that most people don't really know is initially when he started his blue periods, most collectors and buyers actually thought, "What the hell are you doing?" They weren't really into it and they stepped back a bit away from him. And only when he went through the period and came out on the other side did he didn't actually sell that many paintings of the blue period in the time that he was making it. It happened much later, and obviously when he passed away and all of that. So again, the aim or the search to find the link between mental health and art in that sense is still not really there regarding mental health being able to create creativity. I think creativity is independent of mental health. Now, granted, you could be wired a different way that allows you to think of things from a different perspective. This is also exists in different places, and I think that could happen without it being considered a poor mental health or bad condition. But the point is, with different kind of people or different artists and different creativity, there are different things that could work as strengths. However, it doesn't mean that's what you're aiming for. And again, like a bipolar, like a the what do you call it, the schizophrenia, there's a few of them that you can argue that the ability, if you're an actor and you happen to be bipolar, and again, forgive me guys if I'm making it very basic or attaching it just to the kind of symptoms, but essentially if you have multiple personality disorder, the idea is without you consciously doing it or whatever, I'm sure if it was something that people can kind of have control over, potentially that makes them a great actor, for example. Even though I know it doesn't work that way, I have to say that before somebody beats me up. But I'm a bad man. Nobody can beat me up anyway. So, but yeah. What else? Let's say studying artist stereotypes with so even yeah, now the struggling artists, I've tapped on it a little bit, but that's also just a romanticized version of what artists think about themselves. Some of them just romanticize the idea of being an artist. Some of them romanticize the idea that they're different from others, and when you pile this on, it becomes a thing. But more importantly, from my research and what I've seen, it's not special to artists, nor does it make artists or the art have anything to do with mental health. Now, what I would talk about mental health in the other side is there are evidence to show that mental health has helped. Sorry, art has helped mental health. In multiple. There's an institution. I'll give you the name actually. It's called, because it's actually in the UK. It's called the Bethlehem Royal Hospital, which is actually the biggest or the oldest psychiatric hospital I think in the world. And what they do, which is quite fascinating, is a lot of the patients they have in there, they have different art programs that they work with them. Pardon me, I don't know if you guys had me purple, but yeah, they have different programs that they work with them and get them to play around with art, which helps their mental health. Some of them have improved and is grown to a point where it's actually a thing now, and they collect artwork from some of their patients. Some of their patients are now renowned known artists, and in a lot of ways, they're one of an example of showing how art could also help mental health. Hospital rooms is another institution that play around or use or explore mental health, so to speak, getting quote unquote artists to come and create gallery standard art to put around the hospital rooms in collaborations. I also believe what's the name of that institute? Intro Art. This is another company where they specifically, I know it's not just mental health. These ones they're more with physical disabilities, but I do believe they also accommodate mental health. But an art institute, art organization that works hand in hand with these people. I think they're students, and they also help encourage them, and you can see the effect of art within their lives. So even when you go to the tiny little people, I mean, we can talk about it individually. I know there's some really, really cool artists that's kind of one of the things they explore as their practice. They're artists from before. There's institutions like Welcome Collection as well, which generally deal with everything medical, but occasionally they also explore things like mental health and exploring that as well. And finally, I was going to talk about artists that explore mental health. So big shout out to Xavier Leopold, first person that came to mind because he's an amazing artist as well. But I found he's one quite fascinated in his story and the way he's gone about it. I think is special. There are other artists like who there's so many artists I'm trying to think. I mean, you also find more of these writers and poets who kind of explore it, but my brain is going blank a bit. But I have a whole list that of artists that do explore mental health in their work, and that's kind of part of their practice. Um, some through film as well, more than physical. I mean, the list goes on. And one of the days, I actually might have to create more segments in the show where I can just talk about artists I recommend to you and for different reasons. And maybe when there's a special month, like mental health month, I could talk about artists that explore this. Afro Hair Day, I could talk about artists that talked about their hair, things along that line. But in regards to this particular topic, there are a lot of institutions that have explored and actually put to test like how mental health actually can help individuals with illnesses as well as improve their mental state. It's also why, if you've heard the concept of color theory in hospitals, the rooms are usually painted with light blue color or like a light green, but they're like warmer and lighter in color, which allows the mind to kind of, I guess, not be boxed into that square. I guess if it's pure white, it's also a certain kind of way as well. But the idea is even color theory has a way of affecting us mentally and physically. So to a large extent, even the color choice of where a hospital would be and what they would paint on the wall, they also take into account mental health. And there's other little factors regarding mental health that I can talk about. So yeah, another person I was actually gonna highlight as well before I kind of do a conclusion take is someone called Kay Redcliffe Jevers. Again, these names I'm murdering whatsoever. But she's a PhD holder in behavioral science. I can't remember again the university, but again, Kay Redfield. I can't really pronounce the surname, but it's written Javesen or Son. Davison. Guys, that's we're not doing English here in it. But the point is I needed to give you somewhat of a name that you can research, and that's the name. But she has a PhD in behavioral science, and she's someone that's actually taking a lot of time to kind of try and find more of a link between mental health and, I guess, more specific to writers and filmmakers. And what she did discover is there is somewhat of a, what she like, not necessarily a direct link, however more so symptoms, which is what I was trying to talk about, where she's described it in her research that disparative rate of mood swings and historic creative are historically high in creative people. um Essentially saying that there's a lot of mood swings, there's a lot of high emotions and low emotions. So this is not necessarily a condition as such, but to put this in practical, is almost like if I've got an exhibition I'm preparing for, also considering art is somewhat very emotional, all the work and excitement and the nervousness that would go into the preparation of that exhibition, and that exhibition be successful or not successful, at the end of the exhibition there's going to be a full period, almost like a build up and full. And like every normal human being, when you have the full period, it does affect you somewhat. It's why some people go on holiday, is why some people do different things to kind of temperament. The same thing with musicians. Sometimes they have the tours and they go for tour and they're so in the road and it's long, and they come back home, and the first week is great that they're back home. By the third week they're a bit off because they're feeling a bit withdrawal and just whatever you want to call that. But I thought that's also interesting to throw in there, that the conditions of the life we live in also can create little mental instabilities, which doesn't necessarily create a condition. I.e., I can go on a whole rant of people that have told me before that paying you is not my priority, despite holding my artwork. Um, or other situations where people just trying to cheat you out of your work. The fact that you're having to deal with everybody every day trying to take the piss out of you, trying to discredit what you may be doing, or trying to increase it and gas you up. There's just a lot of highs and lows, fakes and reals, all of that that goes in hand with just being an artist, that I can see how that would affect you eventually. But that doesn't necessarily, that creates the creativity. The creativity essentially is there, and these are like components or kind of byproducts of it. So in conclusion, my view is mental health and creativity don't necessarily have a direct link. However, the condition that the world creates around people that are creative, dealing with one's mental health within those confines is quite heavy and hard to do. I would also say those that do have mental health, like diagnosed mental health, and happen to be creatives at the same time, I feel their creativity is is almost pushing through their mental health. So it's a creativity despite having it, as opposed to having the mental health, then that created the creativity. It's they have a strong head, or they might be bound, everything's going bad, but the creativity side of their brain essentially is the last part to go. It still works. And so that's pretty much my last take about that. To wrap it up, I'll do a little bit of talks about exhibitions I've went to go see in recent years. Last time I was talking to you guys, I told you I was going to go to Marrakesh. Yes, I did go to Marrakesh. It was lit. 154, Big Yourself Up. It was good. I saw some artists I love, some artworks I love. I'm saying we was out there. It was an in and out trip, to be honest, but I love Marrakesh, to be honest. We had like this dinner, and yeah, I can go on for days, but the art was arting. You know what I mean? One of my favorite artists I met, or I mean, I didn't meet him, but I got introduced to their work, and I really like his work. His name is Uthman. Uthman? Uthman, what's his surname? No, it's not Uthman Yusuf. It's Usman. I can't remember, but it was with Retro Africa, and I know that he also did the Nigerian Benali, which was cool. Also talking about Benalis, and Venice is around the corner. I'm looking forward to that. You feel me? Um, I would have done a whole rant of other things that happen in the art world, but I think that's a whole topic for a whole different day. But the RA show, and Tango Pass, yeah, bare people told me about it. I finally went there. It lived up to the hype. Proper things, you feel me? Some people have issues with artwork or exhibitions like that that talk about our past, history, complicated things like slavery. And the part that's complicated is how we deal with it, not necessarily what it is. We know slavery what it is. There's no complication involved. It's inhuman in that sense. But in art form, sometimes it brings about different perspectives and allow you to analyze things in different way without just sticking onto the pain of things. So I thought that was interesting. Big show, to be honest. You get to see some real cool artists: Yinkishoni Barrow, Kehinde Wale, Lubna, like just a whole of them. Carl Walker, hell, Sonia Boyers, Claudia Johnson, just yeah, name it, they there. And also, well, am I just mixing shows together? No, I might be mixing shows. No, I don't believe I'm mixing shows. I think they were all in there. And also, I went to a Time Is Now. So I may have mixed one or two together, but a Time Is Now also has a lot of big boys in there. When I say big boys, I'm also referring to some of the female artists I also love. But you know how I mean. It's just, I mean, it's how I talk. But yeah, a Time Is Now curated by the amazing Equation. I already been told you about Equation. The boy gets to it, you know what I mean, catching bodies. I shouldn't really speak about art practitioners this way and whatever, but in real life, this is how I talk sometimes. And in a lot of ways, it's the show is meant to kind of be like a chilled out, vibe. I'm not gonna come here and be like, oh well, the show was a comprehensive mix of blah 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 blah. I can do that sometimes, but not really. You know what I mean? But yeah, big up everybody. A few other shows. I went to what's his name? My guy Tonye. You know what I mean? Caught a body with He Solo. That was really good. I think it's One of Us. That was the name of the show. Yeah, and it was a proper show. You know what I mean? I really enjoyed it. I went to two other shows recently. I can't remember. My brain is going blank. Um, yeah, also, yeah, Barbara Kruger show, like I promised you guys was, you know what I mean, was a proper thing. Yeah, I'm saying, as of the time we're recording this, so probably by the time this things come out, we're already playing around in the Yinka Shinibaro's exhibition. So yeah, I'll give you guys a full reload on that one in the next episode, but it's gonna be on for a while. Look at me doing promotion, but obviously play yourself and don't come is up to you. But if you have time and you wanna, if you want entry point, if you don't know what's going on, you want to be amazed, that's the person. He's one of my favorite artists of all time, period. I know I'm saying that might be a bit extra for some people, whatever, but it's more about the relatability to me. So he's top 10 favorite artists of all time. And yeah, so I would put that with Chess, to be honest. But yeah, it's a good show to check out. And there's a lot of other fire shows. Again, I don't want to overstep and overdo, but yeah, I know there's a lot of other shows. I would say them as they're going on, if you're watching the shows. But yeah, now we're done actually with the show. We're just talking. Big up everybody. You know what I mean? The boys in the place, you feel me? And we in the new spot too. I can't really do the showing, but we're gonna do a proper, you know what I mean, take you around the spot, you know what I mean. We can't even talk too much, you know what I'm saying. Those that know where I'm at. But pretty much that's it, you know what I mean. Welcome to In Relation to Art. Next show, I don't know what we're gonna be talking about. Maybe I'm gonna talk. No, actually, I wouldn't tell you what I'm talking about, but yeah, that's pretty much it. Wait, hold up before we go. You know what I mean. Let me show you guys what the boy walking with. You feel me? Yeah. Today we went with, you feel me, something light, nothing crazy. Feel me? Feel me? Just want you to see the name though. You know what I mean? I don't know if they can see the name though, but yeah, something like you know what I mean? Hey, everybody big up yourself, more prayers, more blessing. As of when I'm recording this, we're almost done with Ramadan, mashallah. To all my Muslim brothers and sisters out there, you know what I'm saying, Ramadan Kareem, and Eid Mubarak soon. And to all the people that are also Christians out there, happy Easter and all that goodness. I think that's around the corner as well. I'm not telling you when I record this, but it's in between a lot of these things. That's why I'm doing all the greetings to all my people that believe in themselves. In it, big up yourself still. So all of that mixed up, you feel me? We ain't even doing all the separation around here. But yeah, big up yourself. Boom.